Typically, we know that we're facing since more than 1 year a global challenge, and this COVID-19 vaccine distribution challenge it could be taken as a global approach. Typically, we're talking about even more than 15 billion doses to vaccinate a global population of 7.8 billion people in a similar way. And we need to reach this global immunization level. And we see every day that if we do not manage this global approach, then there could be new variants coming up. So that's not just about the vaccination of a single country, but really a global challenge, which is a challenge of all the supply chain. In a context which is really global, as I mentioned, but that's also like the biggest logistic challenge ever in terms of magnitude. And that was something that was stated by the WHO in terms of like comparisons, like climbing the world's tallest mountain. And in a context that was one that was saying to you is that like there are a lot of waste in terms of vaccines because of all these supply chain challenges, because a lot of disruption, because these products are very fragile, that needs stability, and that if you have to provide a vaccine to a rural area in a part of the world, if you have a disruption of a couple of degrees, then you have to destroy it, or the vaccine cannot be stable anymore. That means that there are a lot of waste only in this world today, and not in this COVID-19 world where transportation issues are arising, where you need to provide a global solution similarly. So that brought us to the fact that supply chain and life science have never been so linked than since last year, and that typically this innovation part was quite often, minimizing the importance of supply chain, but in a world where there is more pressure on cost, also from OECD, from governments, but also the competition. And in this challenge of providing healthcare to the global population, then supply chain becomes by nature more important in the whole supply chain. I would like to start also a little bit of context regarding the types of vaccines that are currently developed, and you've seen the news in the media, the different types of vaccine, the impact and the discussions. So you know that there are 4 types of vaccines. We're typically talking more about the viral vector and the nucleic acid vaccine, which are the mRNA, DNA, that were not existing in the past, that were being developed since 10 years, but not really like on the market. And the traditional types with the whole virus vaccine and protein subunit virus vaccine. So I won't go through all the technical aspect, but I'll look at it on the supply chain approach, which is important for us. So the mRNA, like the Pfizer, BioNTech, and Moderna, typically was also a low to medium manufacturing. Those companies had no products on the market, BioNTech and Moderna, and I'd like to really build this manufacturing approach. So in terms of scaling up, they had to do some big deals quite rapidly. And in the storage aspect, even though it has been changing a little bit and validated, it requires also deep frozen storage, also in a shelf life, which is quite limited, and with the doses, which are 2. The viral vector, the AstraZeneca, the Johnson & Johnson, are typically also requiring 2 doses, but except for J&J, although we're more thinking of 2 doses now, which is also big asset for the supply chain, as you can understand typically. But that's also interesting in terms of maintaining the capacity of 2 to 8. And that's not just a degree, that's also that because like these warehousing capacity should be validated. You don't start a warehousing in the pharma within minutes, because like you have to do a mapping, you have to do a building first, and you need like to have all the equipments that are sometimes missing, but then also you have to audit, get the validation. So it's not done quite rapidly. So in terms of -70, there are not a lot of capacity right now. Then there are the protein subunit like the Novavax, which generally allow more largest manufacturing and a storage at room temperature, which is really interesting in terms of storage for the 24 hours. So for the last mile, that's something really key. And then also like you have some like the Inovio, which is a US firm that made a deal with the Liège-based company Eurogentech Kaneka, Japanese and Belgium, to manufacture in Belgium this vaccine, which is interesting in terms of storage because that's stable at room temperature for more than 1 year and even 4 to 5 years. At 15, 20, 25, when we're talking about room temperature, that's mostly like the ambient one, and even 1 month at 37, which is very interesting when you're going to the hot country. So that's quite rapidly, we're talking about the supply chain, the logistics, and the storage, which can be a differentiating element in terms of, supply and also building the contract with the different governments and bodies. There are lots of products under development. I won't go through all the ones, but there are interesting supply chain approach regarding that, like this mRNA CureVac, which is something which is stable for 3 months at 5 degrees, which is also very interesting in terms of distribution and storage. You have a vaccine which is developed with the Belgian and Wallonia-based company Universals, which is interesting, even though it's quite early in the phases. But because it's also based on the Universals technology, which is providing small manufacturing batches around the world, and the company is currently on another technology build partnership with Senegal and some African countries to set up local manufacturing unit in Africa to provide the countries with the vaccines. And coming back to the first slide where you have provide a solution for the global world, we need such solutions in order to be really resilient and provide with also local manufacturing. There are also some interesting one like the Bharat Biotech, which is an Indian vaccine, quite rapidly validated in India, in a country where you have 1.4 billion inhabitants, where if you see the news, the COVID-19 vaccines is surging right now. It's really booming in the last days, and where you have to go to a lot of rural areas, and you don't have the money to spend on a mRNA vaccines, which is quite expensive. So they had to develop their own vaccine. And if you don't know, the Indian country is a world leader in terms of vaccines. Then you have a lot of others which are interesting to follow, like the Valneva one, which is French UK. That's the single one, which is the world virus inactivated vaccines under development. So lots of them are there, because what we are seeing is that also it's a long process of the first tier vaccine and then the second one. There are some others, even also some non-injectable vaccines, which can be interesting in terms of approval in some countries. Also the social acceptance of the vaccines, because there are a lot of barriers, philosophical, sociological, and even psychological barriers to get a vaccine. So non-injectable can be something interesting. So we see that's a lot of development currently. We're going back to the supply chain. There are, that's not so easy, as you can understand, to go and manufacture vaccine for all the world, because before this pandemic, no one was expecting that to come, and no one was ready. So the manufacturing were not designed to such a crisis. So that's an unprecedented challenge in terms of manufacturing and outsourcing. So we have to work with the CMOs, which are the contract manufacturing organization, so third party, which are manufacturing, like the AstraZeneca, which is manufactured also in Belgium at Novavax or in other part. But then there is also the challenge of fill and finish, to reconfigure the vaccine line also that were designed for other medicines, modernize it. So that's a huge challenge in terms of manufacturing. And currently, that's about identifying the right partners. And I'm not talking about the commercial deals behind it. So the speed of production is also very important, and also to maintain the integrity of the products, because as you have understood, these are very stable, unstable, or very difficult to manage products. But there are a lot of bottlenecks into this manufacturing line. Typically, the inspection in terms of batch release, the traceability. So there was quite rapidly a need of putting some automatic inspections machines in place, and to ensure also the integrity of all the containers. And I'm not talking about all the the materials which are needed, that really needed to get scaled up in terms of supply. So there is a huge demand on all the materials which is needed around the manufacturing approach, and those materials have their own supply chain. So that's really a global chain which is, as you know, as weak as the weakest link. So some bottlenecks might arise. That's good to know where these vaccines are coming from in terms of manufacturing. Initially, Tours has been like the world center for a couple of years and months, with everyone coming to see and to look at what's happening in Belgium. There are also the similar plant in US for Pfizer. And then they rapidly had to build a partnership with these CMOs. And the initial project was to get 1.3 billion doses in 2021. But since the last 2-3 months, it has been scaled up to 2.5 billion, and it will be going on. So that's also a big job to have been done in a couple of weeks. That's mostly also for the main and richest country, and also with some specific deals that are put in place, like with the China and the Fosun company, which is also the owner of the Club Med, if you know them. And those transportation has also a specific aspect. But even though for Pfizer, they are facing a lot of challenges in terms of supplies. For example, the special filters which are needed for that. Moderna, which is even a younger company, and to get a short information, the CEO of Moderna was once a supply chain guy at Eli Lilly plant in Louvain-la-Neuve. So you never know from Louvain-la-Neuve and supply chain where you can go. So that's always good to keep the journey in mind. And that's currently manufactured in several countries, including Spain, Switzerland, and there is also a batch which is up to 1 billion, which is intending to do. But there was a huge challenges stated last week, which is really a shortfalls in manufacturing that has been bringing a lot of issues in terms of supplies to various countries. And then you have the trade deals and the pressure that are coming in place in terms of where do I put my doses first, because everyone is pushing the pressure on the company that are really under a big pressure. So they have also challenges in terms of transportation at -20, and also a lot of challenges between the transport and the storage between the 2 to 8. AstraZeneca is also quite specific, manufacturing around the world, but typically also in UK, that kept also a lot of aspect. There are also some manufacturing in US that are not exported, even though the AZ vaccine is not validated over there. So we see that in terms of supply, there are also pressure on keeping the stocks over there. That's the vaccines of the world. That's the vaccine of the world. That's the cheapest one. That's the one that is majorly bought by UNICEF and some other. So when you look at the challenges that they are facing currently, if they don't get the validation in the EU and US, we might face a huge challenge in terms of acceptance around the world, because that's really a key aspect. So in terms of supply chain, when you look at the demand planning, that's really very difficult to manage. Some stocks were even frozen in terms of strategic supplies and stocks before distribution. That was the case in UK before they get the approval. J&J is the one that can be also manufactured in Africa, in South Africa, which is also something interesting, and with quite an interesting stability and this one-dose approach. Then there is the Novavax, which is manufactured around Europe mostly, and also largely in India. Also, like the AstraZeneca is also largely manufactured in India with the same partner, Serum Institute of India. And currently some stocks are blocked also because of the surge of the pandemic in India. That should be also like transported at 2 to 8 and I expect to last for 6 months. That has brought some report in the delivery to EU, typically also due to challenges in the supplies. Then you have some others like the Medicago GSK, which is one intended to come at 2023. Then quite rapidly some others like the CureVac, which is typically developed in Germany, mostly for EU, with a former GSK president, and with this survival rate of 24 hours at 5 degrees, which is, reducing the risk and some other aspects regarding transportation as well. Then the Sputnik, which is also difficult in terms of political approach, which was developed by an institute, not really a company, and that has made also a deal with India for the manufacturing of 852 million doses. One of the most complex virus, because that's a double adenovirus, but which is also approved in 60 countries. And there are also pre-deals to manufacture it in Europe. There are some country deals like the Germany one. So we see that there are also the geopolitical aspects on the supply chain that we're seeing growing with the times. We've seen it with Brexit, with the elections, with many aspects, and that's typically one aspect that we're seeing here. Then the same question comes with the Sinopharm, which is the China ones, and the Bharat Biotech, as I mentioned. Typically, the India case is something interesting to discuss, and the photo here is something we cannot do. That's the CEO of Serum Institute, which is just like with an open trucks of vaccines that should be maintained at 2 to 8 in a country which is hot. So just for the joke, but that's like not the thing to do with vaccine, because you can lose all the shipment. And that's also typically a challenge that we have in some of the countries. But this Serum Institute, there's a lot of partnerships, and then like they have addressed a cheap price for the first vaccine, and then they have to find the money to build and to raise the fund for financing everyone, also to manufacture and to distribute vaccines in rural areas. If you've ever been to India, maybe you've been to Dharavi. Dharavi is the biggest slum of Asia, with 7 million people in the heart of Mumbai, and then you have to provide also vaccine to these slums and to manufacture the global population. And then they also had a lot of challenges regarding import and export of products. Typically, they've been more and more dependent from China in terms of API, some raw materials in US that have blocked exports. So even for a manufacturing country, that's difficult to deal with these supply chain challenges. That was the state of heart of the contract that was signed by the end of 2021. So we've seen that there are, typically different types of contract that were signed, also because of the financial means that are on the market. And if I come back to the supply chain approach, that we know that like this planning, sourcing was really a big issue. Planning was almost difficult to do. Maybe we're now more in the planning phase. Europe has learned from his mistakes and try to have better planning. Then the make is something which is really becoming more and more robust, although we have a lot of challenges in the sourcing phase. And then I'd like to come to the deliver, return, enabling phase of the supply chain. Going to this external logistics, every country, and we've seen that was, especially in Europe, not really prepared, although CEPI, Gavi, and WHO has asked the governments to get ready last June 2020 with a set of requests to be prepared in terms of vaccination. But for countries like us, it was quite new, although we vaccine with the flu every year. That's not like in the DNA, like in some other vaccines. So this preparedness is something really important in terms of deployment of operation, tracking, security, budgets, infrastructure. But even though we were not really prepared, we'll see that we've taken the train on, and that's why today it's happening quite well, fortunately. But this preparedness could take place in many aspects, like the air cargo industry and the IATA has also put things in place, because when your planes are all down the floor, that's really difficult then to bring some capacities. And then, like in Ireland and some countries, that they were preparing retrofitting equipment in terms of packaging to accommodate for storage requirement. They invested in freezer farm as well, like we can see. Of course, there were operations for country like the Warp Speed in US, where they even, again, let's be proud of the Belgian touch, recruited a former ULB guy and from GSK to guide this operation Warp Speed. And then also like also very big differences per country like Israel. But Israel is also supporting a lot of threats, is also a country which is very well organized, quite small, and that typically also, for example, to distribute masks to the global population in a couple of days when they received some threats by Iraq a couple of years ago, and with also a big presence of army. So they were logistically minded initially. UNICEF is really facing the biggest challenge ever, although they're used to do it. And they stated that they can transport 850 ton vaccines per month to more than 92 low and middle income countries. But that's not only the vaccines. Like generally, when you transport vaccine, you have 10 times more products like the syringes, like the tents, the equipment, all the equipment around the vaccine to be transported similarly. So that's a big aspect, although they used to do it because they are saving children every year. But they have also to state and to deal with more than 28 manufacturers, and really to build a global collaboration project and to scan the logistics capacity every day, every hour, and to build also logistics network in areas which are not designed for it. And we'll see some of the challenges later on. So that's really a huge challenge, not only in terms of transportation, but of building also the local vaccination approach. In their RFQ regarding the vaccines, that's good to see also about these trends which are global, because we're talking a lot about the US, Europe manufacturing, but actually a lot of the suppliers actually are based in China and India. So we see these trends of this changing global world where The manufacturing takes place also in Asia, with a lot of innovation also that are taking place in these countries, and that's quite interesting to see, or surprising or whatever, that it's also a 4 years contract. So unfortunately, we are not, and we hope, and I hope that we would be finishing with that, but like that's a big challenge, and unfortunately, WHO is also saying that they hope to vaccinate, maybe 20% of the global population by the end of the year. So we're not over with this crisis at this time. So we really need to think global. In terms of distribution, again, in terms of air transport, as you know, from one day to another, or almost, we lost 24,000 city pairs in terms of air freight industry, with a lot of pressure on the companies. So all these air freight capacity had to be changing, with some new companies putting in place. Typically, if I take the India case, it was served by Dubai, and there were a lot of passenger flight taking cargo. But now with the loss of this passenger flight, there are new lines coming in from India directly, new cargo companies putting in place, and typically, like for example, new lines between India and Liège and Brussels. There were some figures regarding the fact that there were needed 8,000 747 cargo to transport the product. Koenig stated a little bit less than that, but there were also some innovation regarding using military aircraft at some point. That was the case with UK, because if you remember, like the approval was given just before December 31st, which was also the Brexit day. So we didn't know exactly what would be the end of this Brexit case, and they were ready to use military aircraft to transport the vaccine at some point. So that was also like a kind of add-on on the challenges to face with. And of course, there were some cold chain issues. Dubai invested a lot, building a big cold chain capacity for vaccine, willing to be the global hub of the world. Also, UPS, FedEx invested, and that takes time, money, and also it's need to pay off with the time, because there is this COVID-19 vaccine. But once you invest, you will keep your investment afterwards. So it also should pay off. And then there is also all the challenges regarding that, like this dry ice, which is also a very dangerous product generally. So these challenges only for the air transport industry are great. Like this dry ice is a dangerous good. Also, there are some regulation in terms of transportation. So you cannot take up to a certain limit, of dangerous good on a plane. That's the air industry regulation. So it had to be changed. And when you change a rule, the time that it takes. So all this regulatory approach is also another challenge. Then you have to maintain this product and get the capacity in the cargo building next to an aircraft. You need to have good training in terms of handling. Maybe put in place some grid train lanes like the Brussels have put. The truck should be waiting at the right place. So yeah, a lot of risks actually in every part of the chain when you have to do the handle point. And the handlers at the airport have always been the guys that have been put the pressure on in terms of cost. So that means that they have almost no margin. So they cannot pay a lot, their guys, so they are missing staff. So at some point, you have some issues even at the weakest point of the chain. Then there are some challenges regarding the customs, this regulatory aspect. You have the climate aspect. If you bring vaccines to Dubai on a tarmac, which can go up to 70 degrees at some point, that you stock your vaccine because of crowded space, and maybe you can lose it even within minutes. There are potential the disruption, which can be a climate approach or whatever. Sometimes there's insufficient infrastructure. At some point, at the handler in Liège airport, there was like a COVID-19 outbreak. I remember it was at Swissport. Swissport is one of the 3 handlers. And then like everyone had to be put in quarantine. So that can come, that's kind of element you cannot expect. Then there are also the boom of e-commerce. We've seen everyone, the last year we said that the e-commerce took 5 years in 5 weeks. We see that at the airports as well. So that's kind of perfect storm in terms of product, because you have a lot of products going on, and then the vaccines are coming in place at this point. So that's a lot of additional challenges. Then you need to get also the container for this transport of vaccines, which are typically a polar kind of vaccines, which were designed for an industry which was growing for 4-5% per year, so a growing industry, but not designed for a booming industry. So like a company like the Vaccination here, they had to scale up their initial plan for manufacturing from 2,500 to 10,000, and that's everything in chain, because sometimes you need like the panels in it, which are manufactured in China, are requested by everyone, and sometimes you have just one supplier. So even for these boxes, there is some pressure on the supply chain. So new solutions are put in place also with the sea shipping that by chance increased their capacities for the vaccine in the last years, but that's not like for the current distribution, because everyone needs vaccine every time, but maybe for a planned vaccine distribution. Also with the trains, why not? Because like we see some trains from China to Europe right now in 40 days, so that's also a possibility currently. In terms of last mile, coming back to these global challenges, of course, this require a lot of challenges. Like these networks of cold chain in Africa is not like mature, of course, I can understand, but that's also an opportunity, because maybe if we build this global cold chain network, that's also an opportunity for the world to bring food to the malnourished population, which are starving around the world. So maybe we can rethink cold chain globally. There are also a lot of waste from the global vials and needles to be managed, and you can understand that these mRNA vaccines are not possible in Africa, typically. There are also challenges like the war. 60 million people are living in and are managed and controlled by armed groups. So we need to reach these people, the travel permits, the capacities in terms of fridges, and we have some innovation in it. A Luxembourgish company, B Medical, is leading with 70% of the market of solar panel fridges, but they also have themselves to increase the capacity. So that's important, and I'm not talking about the fake vaccines which are on the market, which are really a big issue also as well currently, like the thefts and everything around the security of the vaccine. I won't go through all the details regarding these vaccine storage general, but typically there are some process in place in terms of really managing this vaccine. That's not like storage of like a toy or whatever. That's really quite complex. And then you have to work with the 3PLs, the party logistics, the logistics company, the distribution center, that have to put in place their capacities for road transportation in a sufficient capacity. And also, that's something which was not, available in a large quantity, although like currently it's quite okay. But if you need to build a new building, as I mentioned earlier, that's really a long process, and sometimes you need to have a compressor as well, which is like not so easy. Sometimes you have a lead time of more than 6 months to get it. And in terms of supplies of products, just to give you an info, for certain part of the materials, there are some delays up to 24 months currently. So companies are putting contracts in place to get products 2023, 2024. So that's important. And with this pressure, that means that there is a lot of stockpiling. Knowing the capacity, of course, these companies have done some risk analysis of their supply strategy. So when they are looking at the fact that they are missing some suppliers and that there won't be any new ones coming on the market quite shortly, they try to mitigate their risk by doing some stockpiling, which is adding some pressure on the ones that are not doing it, especially the small ones. So that's an additional pressure. And you see on the next picture that also these 3PLs have invested. So from the traditional DHL that you see coming at your door with the e-commerce packet, there are also some investment in the really state-of-the-art, automated, robotized infrastructure for the vaccines, like the one in Nijmegen here. Then when you look at the transportation, to get back into some of the challenge on the national level, you take the Belgian case, for example, you have to look at also the different sides of the distribution. Typically, the Pfizer one, which is my example, is transported with dry ice, and you can put like up to 5,000 doses in a box that can be stored for 5 days at 5 degrees. And then you have like these third layers of packaging. The primary packaging, which is a 2 milliliter type 1 glass that you have to get, of course. And you know the debate about the 5-6 doses. Then you have the secondary packaging, which is a single tray up to 195 vials, which is bringing like up to almost 1,000 per tray. So that's already a lot, and meaning like in a box, which is also the thermal shipper, then you have like around 5,000 doses. So if you look at like these doses, sometimes we think a lot about a lot of volume, but that's not a lot of volume. So, in just a single box, you have just 5,000 doses, which is currently not so heavy. And the heaviest part is the dry ice you put in place. But that means also that you have a lot of value if you take like between 15 and 30 euro. Then you can imagine that you have like this box is 100,000 euro value. That's also a lot of lives. So that means that you don't have the chance to lose it, and that's a 100% quality you need to get in your distribution. You don't want to take any risk, because that's not only products and money that you lose, but you lose life at the end of the day. And these panels, there are also a lot of challenges. The main producer of the boxes, actually, all the production was taken by Pfizer and Moderna for the next 2 years only. And I know, because I know all the suppliers of suppliers, that the China manufacturer for those companies are really also under big pressure. So even though you manufacture vaccine, if you don't get the box, you can get the big issue. So that's really a big aspect. In terms of national transport, we're mostly using vans like this one, which is express transport. But you need also to get like the validated vans. You need to get a good driver, which is GDP trained, good distribution practice. You have to put those SOPs in place. That's something we did, because I'm part also as a supply chain guy of the task force for vaccination. But really to write the SOPs to very rapidly and to train the people at every step of the chain. And then also to use digitalization with the booking and the tracking of everything. Then you got, the storage of the vaccine, which are in various centers, in hospitals as well, where actually also a lot of steps are put in place. Then you get the reception of the vaccines that has a GPS that, it's also managing the temperature. So you have to enable it. Then doing the quality control in terms of quantity. Is it in good standing? Is it okay? And then there is a transfer of ownership. So your own business, then you lose the responsibility of that. And then the storage, and that was also a big challenge to get the ULT in the right doses to get enough thermal shippers. And when we're working with the homes for other people, we needed to get also temperature logger to maintain the temperature. That's not something that's put in place, and there was also pressure on getting the right logger. So yeah, a lot of aspects, and then you get to dilute these vials. So that's also a big step in terms of supply chain and preparation of the last mile, because you have to defrost this vaccine for 30 minutes at room temperature. So you have to get a good planning of the vaccination, then dilute it, prepare the syringe, and do the administration. And then you have this, this follow-up to do 20 days later or more. Regarding these vaccination centers, there are huge challenges. Like you can know, interesting story is that like there is this logistics of the patients, where a lot of events organizers were recruited to do this aspect. There were a lot of tenders for different types of jobs, like the security and safety, because you've maybe seen the news that the people at the center receive sometimes requests up to 500 euro to get a shot. Some people could steal the vials and put water and resell it. So there is a lot of challenges regarding the security. You can get a people anti-vax before the center. You never know. So a lot of human factors challenges, and then of course you have to build this center, put that in place, and get the vaccination aspect. Then of course all the challenges regarding the ordering aspect, the alignment, the capacity of the freezer, the re-icing aspect, and you also had to train a lot of people within minutes or within hours, or for the best weeks, and also like sometimes to manage the Dryads, which is again a dangerous goat. So you need to get like the glasses, you need to get the gloves sufficiently. So if you don't get the gloves, and there was a big pressure on gloves, as you may know, then you might face some difficult challenges. And that's not about supplying the gloves. Like if your tender in place is designed for one supplier, and that you have to do a new public market, then it can take time. So that's not just about getting the material, that's also about the process after it. Won't go through all the shipment monitoring and tracking aspect, but that's not so easy to do, because you have to do it in the container and the freezer. You have to do the mapping of this freezer, the vehicle themselves, the cold chain, the carriers, and you have to do all these aspects really in a chain, which is data collection, the management, the mapping of this freezer, refrigerator, doing some studies. You do also some qualification of the transport route to get the risk around this aspect. Put the contingency plan in place, through collaborating and training the people. So that's a lot of challenges. Of course, we have some challenges regarding the capacity building. I mentioned the CMO and the vaccine developer. I mentioned the batch release and the control, which is like an important aspect. The warehouses that you have to build from, not so easily. The containers, the packaging that I mentioned with these deals in China. The same question with data loggers, vaccination centers that got to put in place, and the staff itself. So that's also a big human challenges, and you as people, you know more and more about the importance of these human factors that I want to underline here, because that's a global and world collaborative project. If we miss one part of the world, we know we will be hit at one point back. So that's maybe for the first time of the world a global project with a lot of stakeholders. And no, if no global solution, there will be no solution. We see also, and probably at the supply chain, we know very much about the intersections and the collaboration between the different departments, but also now the supply chain and the rest of the sector and the innovation, and really also to build a team, build a flexible team that can be resilient, can be motivated, and sometimes also that are missing knowledge that you have to train very, very rapidly. One very important is also regarding the digitalization, which is something which is missing right now, also in terms of traceability. That's typically, a digital supply chain from a manufacturer in pharma, which is really working from the supply warehouse, where you have the collaborative forecasting, inventory management, to real-time consumption data, predictive spare parts, predictive maintenance, with a big control tower working all over that. That's something we could not put in place. That's even not something which is existing right now. WHO is issuing some tenders, is working with IT developer and the best companies in the world to put that in place. But we're not leveraging the data and supply chain and digital approach at its best currently. That's probably something that will be put in the next weeks and months in place. Of course, we cannot remain this cost-based approach, although we compare and the economy and the world is losing 500 billions a day. So that's not really a cost-driven approach. We really need to get the vaccine. That's not that's not the measures that are killing the economy, that's the virus, so we have to defy this virus. But although, UNICEF and some others have not unlimited money, the countries have not unlimited money, so we really have to look at these prices and manage these transport prices, not losing the products, standardize the processes, and also really work on the mid and long-term approach. There were some short-term decision, and we really have to leverage the supply chain to build a global solution. I'd like to end also by doing also our own approach. That with BSMA, we have really this vision of global supply chain approach. We're involved in many aspects in this COVID-19 supply chain. And we have, our European event on October 28th, where we'll be dealing about these aspects. So that's really a non-profit approach. We're also stakeholders with a lot of people, with WHO and some others right now, Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. So, that's something key. So, yeah, I would like to really thank you for your attention today. And your interest in the session, and I remain available now or later for some questions. Typically in Europe, we were missing this part, although some countries were in the past looking at this approach, like the France had put a kind of supply chain strategic team in place to work on strategic projects for the French market, doing some stockpiling, and they are doing some strategic move into this direction. But they were not some supply chain guys, and that's also why the CEPI and WHO and some other try to raise to this government to get prepared. In US, that was another approach. It was also led by the army, that we often find in many pharma companies as well. They bring this logistics guy into these people. So that was another tradition, and but maybe we will learn from that, and typically looking at more strategic vision at the end of the day. But the fragmentation of Europe is quite difficult. We're discussing with CIBA, which is the cluster of bioregion, which is addressing a lot of recommendation to EU and typically the commissioner. And we're the guys from supply chain, but that's we know that like that's something missing. I'm happy to be part of the task force because I'm probably the only supply chain guy, and I've brought some others around the table. But like, yeah, we will see with the time if it makes progress, and that's another story. But we'll be there. Yeah. Yeah, I think that's typically a threat that we have to consider. That's why there are a lot of discussion behind it, and you can remember that the UK blocked some export, and that like they apologize for that, but they say we had no other choice. So typically the Indian case is interesting because they similarly want to be the leader in biopharma by 2030. So they have also a role which is supported by Minister Modi to be the world leader. And in the same time, they have to save their population. So yeah, actually last April, May, they blocked exportation for 2 weeks. And we had to find a lot of raw material like phenol, and some others, even like for the hospitals when you had to do some, anesthesia, everything was coming from India. So at one point of the day, in May, actually all Belgian hospitals could have suffered from a lack of anesthesia, and so there were pressure to provide this material. So that's typically a trade deals, and that's why the supply chain has to deal with that with the time. But yeah, that's a threat, and we could have anticipated that. But I regret that there even today, 1 year later, we're not anticipating more what can occur. But that's like, unfortunately, we guys from the supply chain have to be the more resilient. So we have to find solutions. And the good point is that some of these companies have also plants in Europe, so they can also manufacture from there. Like, yeah. That's a risk, yeah, we've identified a little bit like the climate risk also that was underestimated. Like all these companies had some plants in Puerto Rico, and then there was a storm over there, everything was blocked. So actually, yeah, these new risks are arising, which is really pushing a lot of thoughts on how I structure my supply chain and how I can be strategically, independent. Currently, the trend that we're seeing is the reshoring, pressure from every country. That was started in US with Obama, and then of course with Trump and now Biden. Even Japan has put a lot of pressure on reshoring, and UK, of course. So we see that, but not everything can be reshored, of course. But sometimes in the past, all the companies were looking at the cost only, and not that much at the risk. And now the risk has been taking more importance. So we'll see the trend, but that's, yeah, in this global world where you have a lot of nationalism coming in place. That's quite like the difficult approach for us again. Yeah.